So we are on the end of our kind of landing the plane on our Ecclesiastes series. There's a few more chapters, and this has been such an incredible book to be in. It's all about ancient wisdom that we can learn from and apply to our lives today. It's timeless wisdom, and it really is. It's so essential to understand wisdom and how it applies to the details of our lives. We don't want our faith just to be something we keep vague or we talk about when we're at church groups or when we're at church or when it's on topic. We want to understand how to live as followers of Jesus in the details of our lives. And so the wisdom scriptures help us face those details and actually think through them. And so that's what we've been doing. Today is a heavy topic. Today we're talking about facing the reality of time and death. Not avoiding the reality, but leaning into it and dealing with it. And so let's see what Solomon in Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verses 16 through chapter 9, verse 12. I'm going to read through the whole thing. In my search for wisdom and in my observation of people's burdens here on earth, I discovered that there is ceaseless activity day and night. I realized that no one can discover everything God is doing under the sun. He's describing the mysteries on earth. Not even the wisest people discover everything, no matter what they claim. This too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of the godly and the wise people are in God's hands, no one knows whether God will show them favor. Verse 2, the same destiny or fate ultimately awaits everyone. Whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonially clean or unclean, religious or irreligious, good people receive the same treatment as sinners, and people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. It seems so wrong that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. Already twisted by evil, people choose their own mad course, for they have no hope. There is nothing ahead but death anyway. There is hope only for the living. As they say, it is better to be a living dog than a dead lion. The living at least know they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, nor are they remembered. Whatever they did in their lifetime, loving, hating, envying, it's all gone. They no longer play a part in anything here on earth. Are you encouraged yet? This is heavier and gets heavier and heavier. Verse 7, he says, so go ahead. Eat your food with joy and drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless days of your life that God has given you under the sun. The wife God gave you is a reward for all of your earthly toil. Then verse 10, he goes back into philosophizing. Whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work or no planning or no knowledge or wisdom. I have observed something also under the sun. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race. The strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. The wise sometimes go hungry, and the skillful are not necessarily wealthy. And those who are educated don't always lead successful lives. It is all decided by chance, by being in the right place at the right time. People can never predict when a hard time might come. Like a fish in a net or bird in a trap, people are caught by sudden tragedy. All right. So we're going to unpack this, but really there's two constant themes that come out throughout the whole book of Ecclesiastes. And the theme of, and the kind of the deal with Ecclesiastes, Solomon is searching out the world. He's searching out wisdom. He's trying to understand life in the world. And two themes that keep coming up is this reality of time and this reality of death, and then mysteries of God, things that we don't know. So the first one here in verses or chapter 8, verse 16 through 17, he's talking about the mysteries. Really a summary of this section. Let me first just read it again. In my search for wisdom and in my observation of people's burdens here on life, I discovered that there is ceaseless activity day and night. I realized that no one can discover everything God is doing under the sun. It doesn't matter how wise you are. And so what we need to know about this, Solomon's saying, look, there are mysteries in this world. There are mysteries in this world that you cannot and will not understand. There are mysteries about why some things happen and why some don't. And that why question will haunt us forever when we come across these mysteries. And he says only God knows his purposes in these mysteries. That's tough for us to grasp because we are people who want to understand things. We like to be in control. And then he goes on, and I want to connect the last verses I read in verse 11 of chapter 9 through verse 12 to demonstrate some of these mysteries. He says, I've observed something else under the sun. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race. The strongest doesn't always win the battle. The hungry sometimes, or the wise go hungry. The skillful are not always wealthy. The educated don't always live successful lives. And so he's just given some very practical examples of some of these mysteries. But some of the bigger ones get me, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about when it comes to these mysteries where we don't get to understand why, and only God knows the answer. Some of the big ones for me are, you don't get to pick what time period you're born in. Why were you born? Why were we born in this time? We don't get to pick the family we're born into. Why was I born into this financial condition versus this other one? You don't get to pick that. That's what God gets to. You don't get to pick how you look. What if you got to pick how you looked before you came to earth? Oh, that'd be convenient. You don't get to pick that. It's a mystery. You don't get to pick how you were gifted and equipped for life and the limitations you will have. These are all mysteries that are beyond us. And then some of the more difficult ones are, why do bad people do well in this life sometimes? And why, from our perspective, do bad things happen to people we think are good? That's one of the most challenging questions when you see this happening. You see somebody who is evil, doing evil things, and they get ahead in life. And they almost seem to be rewarded. And then you see somebody who's trying to do good, trying to be honest, trying to live a good life, and something bad or tragic happens to them. Why does sickness or tragedy fall on people in this life, like death, early death? We've all probably known people. They just suddenly died or got sick. Why does that happen to some people? We don't get to know these things. Why didn't it work out? Maybe a relationship or a business idea that you're working on that failed. Why didn't it work out? Sure, you can learn some things from it. You can know a little bit, but you don't always get to know all the factors involved. These are the mysteries Solomon is saying. He's saying his point is, some of these things you'll never know. So I was talking to my neighbor yesterday. We were having a little fire pit at our house. Me and Lindsay and Merrick, we're having a nice date out there. We're in this season of life. And then my neighbor just rolls up, and he was welcome. And I invited him to have a seat. And so we're hanging out. And this is a guy I've known for a long time. He always brings treats to my dog. My dog can hear his car and knows it's him. And so he rolls up, and usually we're just talking about whatever. But in this conversation, I learned some crazy things about him that have shaped his life, really sad things. I remember at one point he had told me he had lost a son. And so this was November, I guess it was November 1st yesterday. He had lost his son. The anniversary date's October 31st, every Halloween. And so that was fresh on his mind. And he was talking about this. And he was just, and then he was talking about it like it happened yesterday, literally. And then he brought it up and he said, it happened like years ago. but the pain stuck with him like it was present. And then I'm like already like, whoa, this just got heavy. And it was fine. It was like we were leaning into it, and it was like really interesting to like share that with him. But then he starts talking about other family members that died in that same time period. And all this death that he had experienced. And I just felt like, and so we were talking about this, and he was really wrestling with how the pain never leaves you. But then you have to live, he's a Christian, and you have to live in the tension of this pain that is so present, but then the reality that every day of your life is a gift, and to see it that way. And we didn't have an answer. We were just living in it. At that moment last night, we were just sitting in it. And I didn't even experience it, but I felt the heaviness of it. And he kept saying, like, man, I just don't know why these things happen to, and it was just mystery. And we couldn't resolve it around the fire. And so I think this just is a small example of what Solomon's trying to get at. He's looking around the world and going, man, there's so many things that we don't get to control or understand. So that's how he opens this section. And I think that's really connected and timely when we're talking about time and death. Because then he moves into verse 1 and 6 of chapter 9. And the line in here, let me read it. Even though the actions of the godly and the wise people are in God's hand, no one knows whether God will show them favor. And then he goes and he talks about it doesn't matter whether you're righteous or wicked, you're good or you're bad, you're clean or unclean when it comes to worship, you're religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners. We all have the same fate. And so he's introducing the topic of death here. First it was mystery, now he's introducing death. And so what I want to do here is just pause for a moment and bring in time into talking about death. Because time, the passing of time, and then the day of our death are two realities that no one gets to escape. And so we have to work through these things and understand these things and figure out how to respond to these things. And so first I want to talk about the passing of time, because Solomon, in the book of Ecclesiastes, he was frustrated with these realities. He did not like these realities. It made him, that's why we see statements like meaningless or hopeless or whatever, because he was frustrated. So let's talk about the first one, time. He was frustrated with the passing of time, and because time is temporary. It's fleeting. So the way he describes it, and this is throughout all Ecclesiastes, the theme keeps popping up. He says everything is meaningless. That's not a great translation. That's an English translation. The Hebrew word is hevel, or hebel, depending on the way they use it, with a B or a V, and it means fleeting. It means vapor, puff of smoke. And so what he's saying there is time is just moving on. You cannot stop it from moving on, and you can't grab onto it. So I love the imagery of vapor or puff of smoke. It just happens, and you just like, oh, I want to hold on to this moment, and you grab it, but it vanishes. That's how life is, and he was frustrated with that fact. I think we can all agree on this. But again, I had lots of really good conversations this week, really related with this topic of time and death. The other day, 2 days ago, I was surfing out front of Rachel Beach, and I ran into a guy that I've literally surfed with him for like 26 years out at C Street. I'd always see him out there. And I don't know him well, but we know each other from just being familiar, and we would always just kind of have surface conversations. And so he just kind of opened up to me this day. And so we were talking about the waves were good. It was fun. And we're like, man, this is such a good moment. And I don't know how he jumped in, but he dropped in. And he started talking about his whole life, and he's 54 years old. And he's talking about how he's getting perspective now. And he's like, man, he's dating someone now, and they've adopted a 6-year-old child. And so his whole world is getting shifted around, and that's what he was talking about. But he said, Brian, I have traveled every year almost from January 1st to mid-March to places like Kauai, Puerto Rico, all these tropical places. And I'm just like, that's my fantasy. And this guy, and I'm not going to get to do that at this point. And this guy has done it. He's done it every single year. And so then he was telling me about his job allowed him to do that. And so then he's telling me the story of time. And he says, I've just been chasing these good waves and these swells year after year. And then a couple years ago, his best friend, this guy, Jimmy Ellington, just died suddenly, had a tragic death. And that was a time disruptor for my friend and for me and all of us who knew Jimmy. And then right after that, multiple other friends died in the past 2 years. And so Jimmy passed away, and he said, and so for him, he's telling this story of going to Puerto Rico for year after year with Jimmy, staying in the same place. And now he's going back to Puerto Rico, and Jimmy's not there. And he's having to face the reality that you can't stop time from going on, and you cannot grab up the good moments and bottle them and pull them out when you want, and you're left to continue to seek and to chase the next good moment. Man, it was so heavy, and just the perspective is so good. But that's what Solomon is talking about here. It's hevel. It's a vapor. This life is a vapor, and we go from one moment to the next, and you can't stop it. And so my question to you today is this, can you relate to what Solomon's talking about? Trying to grab onto the good moments of life? Trying to extend. Have you ever been in a moment you're like, you recognize this is a good moment. Maybe it's vacation. And you're like, I want to extend this feeling. I want to, maybe on vacation, you're like, can we arrange more flights and all that stuff? And you do extend it. But I'm talking about like, maybe you're around the table with your family, you're like, man, all the chaos, and then we're having a good moment. Or you're doing some activity with some friends, and you're like, this is a good moment. Or you're with your spouse, and you have one of those moments. Or you're doing your work, you're just totally immersed in your work, and you're like, this is good. And you're like, man, can I keep it going? Can I keep it going? Can I keep it going? Or you've had a great memory in the past, and you try to recreate it. Because you want to relive that moment. That's what we're talking about here. That's how we relate with the experience when Solomon is looking at the world and he's frustrated, trying to grab on to this vapor called life. And what we end up doing is we end up chasing the next good moment, trying to recreate these next good moments and looking for our life in these moments. So that was one of his first frustrations. That's throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. In chapter 9, verse 1 through 6, he's talking about the end moment of death. The moment of our death. And he was frustrated. Solomon was very frustrated with death. Because he was frustrated with the fact you don't know when you're going to die, and you cannot prevent it. That's what that whole rant was. Doesn't matter if you're good or bad. Doesn't matter if you're righteous or evil. Doesn't matter if you're ceremonially clean for worship or unclean. Doesn't matter if you're religious or irreligious. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're wise or foolish. You all end up at the same place, which is death. And so the good news for us on this side of history, because this book is really old, is we have the whole story. We have the whole picture of the gospel of what has happened, and that is this. Solomon didn't have that picture. We have the good news that of Jesus Christ is that he has defeated death. He has conquered sin and death on the cross and through the resurrection. By him being raised from the dead, he defeated death. And so anyone who does believe in him gets to conquer death too. I love the scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul says, death is swallowed up in victory. Death, where is your sting? Oh, death, where is your sting? For sin is the sting that results in death, and the law gives its power. But thank God he gives us victory over sin and death through Jesus Christ. That is the Christian hope. See, Solomon, from his perspective, he was the wisest person who had ever lived. He didn't have this good news of Jesus Christ, yet Christ had not come. In Solomon's day, they had talked about the coming of the Messiah, but they had not seen it lived out yet. On this side of history, we get to look back in time 2,000 years ago where Jesus lived as a real person. And he was put on that cross in a real place in Jerusalem. And he was raised from the dead at a real point in history. And because of that, it changes history for everyone who has already lived and everyone who would live in the future. For those who believed in him, death is not the end. It does not have the final word. And this life of fleeting moments going one after another, headed towards death, ends up being just the title page of the eternal story, as C.S. Lewis says it. Man, isn't that good? And so my question today, and the way I want to land the plane here, is how do we respond to these realities of time passing along and the reality of death? Because we do not get to escape either one of those. I've got 3 things here. The first is this, is you have to accept the reality of time and death. Seems very simple. But if you look at the way we think about our lives, and the way we live our lives, we are avoiding the realities of death. We are trying to beat the system of time. We are arranging our whole lives to run from these realities. And so the first step is literally to accept the reality of time and death. The way Moses said it in Psalm 90, this is one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible when it comes to wisdom. Moses said, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days so that we have a heart of wisdom. Teach us to accept the reality of death. Teach us to understand that our lives, our days are numbered so that we will have this wise perspective when we look at our lives of how we should go about our days. Help us to see our lives clearly when it comes to time. And I think this here makes it harder. I'm not going to go on a rant again about this. I'm just going to sprinkle in my frustrations every message. But it disconnects us from reality. And so we have to remind ourselves that our days are numbered so that we have a wise perspective. And so part of that is this, the acceptance part. Accept the reality of time and death. Life is temporary. This is going to be hard to hear. You are getting older every day that passes, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're getting older every day that passes, and one day you will die. When you're a teenager or when you're in your 20s, it can feel like you're not going to die, and you've got your whole life ahead of you. But you cannot escape that life is temporary. It's fleeting. It's like a vapor. It's not meaningless. That's the wrong translation, really. It's like a vapor that we cannot control. You're getting older every single day. And so think about that reality. One day you will die. So I just have a simple question. Have you accepted this reality? That you cannot stop time, that you're going to get older. What does it look like to embrace getting older? That's a hard one. Have you accepted the reality that one day you will die? Because that's the beginning of wisdom, is understanding that. So then, when you have wisdom, wisdom helps you see life in seasons. This is so important and so helpful. Life has seasons. Like, I think I really didn't learn this till I was approaching my 40s. Before my 40s, I was just like, wake up every day and go, I've got forever. What's going to make me happy today? And chase it. But now that I'm getting old and I'm embracing that fact, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to see this differently. And so wisdom helps you see life in seasons. You have your childhood season where you're purely just learning. Teenage season where you're learning and you're exploring. Then you have your 20s where you're experiencing freedom for the first time. And you're learning skills, you're learning education. You have this opportunity to fully explore your freedom and deal with the consequences. You're like, my parents told me not to do that. And you're like, I'm going to do that. Ooh, that hurt. Ooh, maybe they knew something. Then you got your 30s where you're working, you're building something. In your 40s, you're building. You know what? I heard this new phrase that's helpful for seasons. The 40s and early 50s to like mid-50s is the midlife squeeze. Back in my day, I always heard my parents making fun of people that bought Miatas, convertible Miatas, because they were having a midlife crisis. It was so funny. Like, oh, so-and-so having that crazy crisis. They bought a convertible Miata. I was like, what? But that was a big deal back in the 80s. And so, but the midlife squeeze, the reason people do that is because in your 40s and 50s, you are squeezed by so many responsibilities. If you've taken on marriage, you've got responsibilities. If you're in the depths of your career, you're feeling the work responsibilities and the financial responsibilities because you've bought so much things. If you have kids, you're feeling all the responsibilities of the kids. You're being squeezed. And then you go into your later 50s and 60s, and you start entering into a brand new season. And you're more of the sage season. You're full of wisdom. Some people have grandchildren. Some people are handing off their wisdom of their jobs to other people behind them. But it's the sage season. And so those are just some ways to look at it, but the point is this, is wisdom helps you see that life is full of seasons, and you need to understand what season you're in. So that's the question is, what season are you in right now? What season are you in right now? And have you accepted that season? Because isn't it odd when you have someone who's in the sage season and they're trying to look 25 and act 25? I know that's real personal now, but isn't it odd? It's kind of odd. And so it's because they're not in their season. They're resisting the reality of life. And so what does it look like to be in our season? So what season are you in right now? Have you accepted your season? Are you avoiding your season? This is very important. So one of the goals before you leave here is, what season are you in? The second thing is, be present in your current season of life. This is wisdom. Be present in your season of life. And so a couple questions. What would being present and fully engaged in this season of your life look like for you? What would it look like to be fully engaged and be fully present in this season of your life? What would the vision look like? What would it look like on a day-to-day basis? I've thought about that a lot. Like this season, we're in a unique season. Our kids can feed themselves, they can get dressed, they can do all the things. And so it's just a mental season. It's a time season. And so in some ways, it's so much easier. And so to be very clear, like to give you a little clear moment of something where I have to make choices. I'm in a season where my kids are happy to do their own thing. And so for me, it just opens up a lot of freedom with my time where I can be like, hey, I'm going to go surfing by myself today and not have to worry about anybody else on my schedule. Or I can go just sit there alone in the quiet and not have to talk to anybody. These are things I like. It's like there's me time. And so, and now, like, I've wanted this for so many years, right? And now I have it. But when I step back and go, what season I'm in? This is a crucial season. I'm 45 years old. My kids are not gone. And so it's a moment where I go, man, I'm going to try to spend time with them in different ways. Try to be engaged and helpful and in these moments with them. Spend time with Lindsay instead of just pursuing my own agenda just because I have the time now. But that looked a lot different 10 years ago, where I would have been in pure rebellion to be abandoning my responsibilities to pursue my own way. The hack is to get your kids to do your passions. DJ has done a great job of that. Y'all should talk to DJ. What does being present and fully engaged in this season of your life look like for you today? And then here's an important one. This is difficult. What fantasies or distractions do you need to put to death? That's radical language. Put to death to be present in your current season of life. What fantasies? My fantasy, like right now, one of my fantasies, I mentioned it earlier, was literally, it's a real goal, but it's more of a fantasy, is being able to disappear from January to February, still keep my job as a pastor here, and also be able to pursue my pleasures in a warm place. Because that is the ultimate high. If you can do this, I encourage you to do it. Disappear from Wilmington when it's cold, come back when it's warm. It's amazing. That is my fantasy, but for my life, at this season, at this financial position, it's a fantasy. And so I need to stop entertaining that fantasy this January when I'm complaining about the weather and go, I just got to put this to death only this year. Next year might be different. But this year, but what are some real distractions in my life, like not just fantasies in my head, but physical things in my life that I need to put aside right now to be present in life? These are important questions to be able to live from a heart of wisdom, to be present in your current season of life. What fantasies or distractions do you need to set aside or actually just put to death right now to be present? And then the final thing is this, where we see this in chapter 9, verse 7 through 10. This is a theme that also keeps coming up. I'm going to read it. He says, basically, as a response to the realities of time and the realities of death and the realities of the mysteries of God, the things we can't understand, he said, this is what you do. Verse 7, so go ahead, eat your food with joy, drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Live happy with the woman you love through all the vapor days of your life. It's Hebel that God has given you under the sun. The wife is a reward for the earthly toil. And he says, whatever you do, your work, do it well. And so a simple summary of that is enjoy the good moments of life as gifts from God. Connect the good moments of life as gifts of God when they come. And he lists out from his perspective what those are. And I want to be very clear, this isn't hedonism. Because hedonism would be carpe diem, seize the day, because life is fleeting and death comes to us all. This is Christian. It's not hedonism. Hedonism is looking for life in the good moments, which is chasing the wind because they cannot satisfy you. It's living for the next good moment to make you happy. And it will always disappoint in leaving you wanting more. That's hedonism. What this is practicing gratitude when God blesses us with good moments in our lives. When they come, your response needs to be, praise God. This isn't bad you're enjoying something. That's not in Scripture. Praise God for this good moment. Give him credit. And this is one of the secrets to being happy in a broken world. Is to when those moments come in. And so one thing I do is every morning, I write down, what am I thankful for? The grumpier I am when I wake up, the more I need to practice gratitude. And I start with the most simple things. Thank God I'm healthy today. Thank God the sun is out. And I just go down the list of these little pleasures and simple moments that I can give credit to God for, and it makes you happy. So my question to you is, what are some simple things in your life that you are thankful for in this season that you can praise God for? Because that is the way to enjoy these simple moments in life. You have to accept the reality of time and death, understand the season you're in, be committed to being fully present in this season. What does that look like? What do you need to remove in your life to be present? And when the good moments come, enjoy them and give thanks to God.